But I don't know if you guys saw Rick Santelli just go off yesterday on national
God,
television.
I haven't heard a Rick Santelli quote in about 2.5 or 3 years.
It was incredible. He was asked what he feels about the tariffs, and he took the question and he goes, prices are going up. First, he called tariffs a bargaining chip, and then he goes, prices are going up no matter what. He said, whether you put it on the tax side or whether you put it on the tariff side, our policies are silly and we can't be Santa Claus. All these programs aren't policies, they're promises. They're not going to get by Congress, and they have a cost we can't afford. And then he talked about the impacts of these policies, skyrocketing home prices, skyrocketing home insurance. And his biggest point was, why didn't that come up? Why didn't we discuss the $35 trillion in debt? Why didn't we discuss 120% debt? Why didn't we discuss the fact?
Who? What are you talking about?
In the discussion, the presidential debate the other day. Some would think that's a fairly important topic. We didn't talk about it at all. And we didn't talk about it because it seems neither candidate really wants to address this problem. It's a hard problem to address, but it seems we want to ignore it as long as possible. And I wonder, Tom, did you have any qualms being somebody that's in finance, somebody that's economically savvy, somebody that stays in tune with policy that impacts your business and the overall economy? Were you in any way disappointed that these types of topics were not addressed the other night?
No, I'm not disappointed at all. I think, and I didn't hear the whole Rick Santelli thing, but he was so far off base that it doesn't even matter. I mean, like, his whole argument is so flawed that I don't really care what he has to say. I mean, I like Rick. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a smart guy. I just think his argument was flawed, and it was just a typical, he was just ranting, but his argument didn't make any sense to me. And as far as the debate, no, you cannot. They did ask a question about debt, I believe. And I think, that's when Trump went off in some other direction. And that's when Kamala
all went off in some other direction. Nobody
I will explain you can talk when your turn is. Trump went off in some Trump went off in some crazy direction. He, when they asked about debt, he talked about immigration. And Kamala went big picture and just talked about it at, a crazy high level about building up the economy, but didn't cover the topic. My point is, no, I really don't want to hear those people. I think I was very clear yesterday in a discussion with Dylan about what my expectations are for the president of the U.S. My expectations for, and this is the reason it should not be covered in a debate. My expectations for the president is to maintain a smooth operation. Like, the objective for the president is not to be the person that solves the debt problem. That's not their role. The objective for the president is to come in and make sure that everything runs smooth so that as a nation, we serve our obligations. And the president's role is to make sure they put people in the right places that can accomplish whatever their objective is, whatever's on their platform. In the case of the debt, you're asking for something that is actually it's a very much a moving target. And I don't think that the debt means what the national debt used to mean. And I don't think that it is a president's job to address it, other than to bring in people that's their role, is to address it, is to assemble the team. So asking somebody in a debate what they feel about, how are they going to address the national debate? The answer to the question should have been, we're going to bring in a team and we are going to tackle it and we're going to make it better. The answer is not like, what are you going to do? They have no idea. And I wouldn't expect either of them to.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. Don't you need to know whether they believe it's an issue in the first place?
Well, that's the whole thing. Yeah, you do. You do. You're right.
So do you need them in national television in 90-second clips or less to try to articulate to the entire country, 350 million people plus the world, exactly how they plan to tackle the debt problem? No. But do you need to understand whether or not they believe it's an issue and how they think about deficit spending at the highest level? I
totally agree with you. And like I said before, the answer to the question is yes, this is a serious issue, or yes, this is something that we are addressing, and this is how we are addressing it. But not, hey, this is what I'm planning to do, because they have no idea. And it would be, the answer would be foolish.
Can I talk yet?
Sure, go ahead.
I think you should be a presidential candidate, or at least do a debate as a presidential candidate. Because when my friend Victor Jones talked about Rick Santelli and what Santelli said, you said, and I quote, "I didn't hear Rick Santelli, but he's completely wrong."
No, that's not what I said. What I said is I didn't hear the whole thing. I just saw the clips they played.
And he's completely wrong. So you heard excerpts or little things that somebody chopped together that fits their agenda.
I don't think somebody chopped it together. I was listening to two different clips yesterday. I was listening to two different clips. One was the Barstool guy going against Dan Bernstein of The Score, which was a great little back and forth. And the other one...
It's awesome. It's
awesome. Don't call me Bernstein unless you know me. I love that. Which I was listening to that. And then the other piece was the Santelli thing, which is like, just a small thing, him going off. And I just don't agree with them. I mean, it was just a venting about all the crap that,
I think there's one way to look at it, which is venting. But I think the premise started, and I don't want to make this too much about him, because I can make it about myself. I can make it about Tony. I can make it about anybody that maybe shares in this concern, which is, he started by saying, I've got kids and I've got grandkids. And the fact that they are looking at a world where they might not be able, they can't afford a house. And if they could afford the house, they couldn't afford the home insurance that's going up 20 to 40%, depending on the area you are. I think that is a valid concern and a reason to be passionate about the current state of affairs and a reason to be passionate about setting us on the right path. So I suppose my question would be, do you believe, I've talked to really smart people, and some people say the debt is not really a problem. Even I think Chamath Palihapitiya in a podcast I listened to, he said it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal as everyone else makes it. But I think that probably depends on what your point of view is. It probably depends on whether you're an asset owner.
Yeah, I have two things to say about that. The first thing is that I agree the debt is not really a big problem. It doesn't mean what it meant, 30, 40 years ago. And the second thing is there is no time in history when you can't use the old tired line of, I feel nervous about how my kids are going to do and my grandkids. Like, that's a line people have been using since the 1950s. There's never been a time in history, in any country, under any administration, any time that you can go back where people were going, man, it was so much better, or we could afford this or that. I mean, it's such a ridiculous, tired, bullshit argument. That's what I hated about what he had to say, and I hate when people use that argument. There's never, ever been a time when somebody goes, oh man, this is great right now. Nobody ever says that, ever. Even though even though you could be in one of the strongest economies ever, the people go, no, it's not for everybody. And it's just, it drives me nuts, because when things are supposedly bad, then things are worse. When things are good, they're bad. So I hate the argument. The argument on the deficit is very different. The argument on the deficit is, how relevant is it today? How relevant is it that we pump liquidity into the system? How relevant is we do all the things that we didn't used to do, we do today? So how relevant is debt? And the answer is, based on how the economy's moving and chugging along and everything else, it's probably not that relevant.
But nobody, I just had a great email somebody wrote me. Nobody gets elected president by going out and saying they're going to cut spending. So it's a stupid argument or question to put out there to somebody, because they want to say what gets them elected. And as you would, or I would, or anybody would.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
For some position.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And the argument, again.
So why have a debate at all then, I guess? Really.
No, because you can ask other things. There's social issues. There's things like that which you believe in. You want to know what people believe in. That's the whole reason. I agree with you. That is the whole reason. But getting back to your original discussion on what Santelli said, Vic, my issue with it is it was all sound bites. It's all garbage. Like, that's not, I don't care about that stuff. Like, to me, as a trader, that's not why. I don't give a crap what his opinion is on that stuff. Like, that's why I don't listen to that kind of stuff. Like, that to me has no value. What's valuable to me is, okay, I don't know what floor he was on. Was he on the board of trade or whatever? All right, let's talk bond market. Like, that to me is cool. I don't care about the other stuff.
A couple of responses, all great stuff. First response is, just because there are always issues doesn't mean that we as a society should just say it's fine. We shouldn't worry about this stuff. Just because there are always issues that we can improve on as a society, it doesn't mean we should lose focus or not care about solving those issues, because you can always make that argument. That's number one. Number two is, I think debt, the level of debt for our country, it does matter, and it continues to manifest itself, and it's most painful for those trying to hang on, man. And I think increasing the money supply 40% in 2 years, we are creating a very difficult environment for many people to try and hold on, to pay for groceries, to get into a house, so on and so forth. And then to go a step further, which is relevancy, your point of relevancy. I love your discussions with Dylan Radigan, and when you approach an issue that's both market and social related. I think we live in an environment right now where we need to be paying attention. We need to be policy oriented. We need to be talking about these issues, and they do impact bond prices. They do impact the risk-free rate that we're going to be paying both in the short and the long term. And that risk-free rate manifests itself throughout all risk assets. If we continue to print money and at these types of rates and accumulate debt at these levels, it has an impact into the entire yield curve and therefore all of risk assets. So in some way, I do believe fiscal spending, especially this dominant fiscal impulse, it is relevant to all assets at some level, either directly or indirectly. And I do think it is important. It's just whether you choose to believe it is or not, whether you choose to believe it's relevant or not. But it does tie back to every asset price. I don't care if we're talking NVIDIA, if we're talking about gold, if we're talking about Bitcoin, all of this stuff leads back to one issue. It's the money. And all the social issues that we could be talking about, again, comes back to some key issues around what we do with our money, whether or not we're respecting trade-offs or whether we're trying to do everything, whether we don't want to tax, but we still want to pay for programs, whether we want to continue to build out the military and continue to add on to social services. These are important issues of our time. I don't think we should take a pass. And I don't think young people want to take a pass at saying, I'm going to ignore these issues because my parents could have said times are tough then, and my grandparents could have said times are tough, because our grandparents, they rolled up their sleeves and they did what they had to do to make a better future for their kids. And our parents theoretically should have done the same. And to make a case that we shouldn't do the same, I think is the exact opposite of what this is. I think we should care.
I have no problem with open discourse on any of this stuff, but
that's the point. We are not having the discourse.
I know, but your original, let's not confuse open discourse with your original discussion was why weren't the people running for president having this discussion, and why wasn't that relevant? And my point was because when you only have 90 minutes, and the objective, in my opinion, the objective to those 90 minutes is get to know what these candidates think about things that they can control, which is their own feelings on different social causes and things like that. What they feel about with respect to the debt limits, debt ceiling, whatever you want to say, to the size of the debt is, to me, completely irrelevant. That's not something that they have any control over. That's a team that they have to bring in. That's just going to be complete rhetoric, complete just political speak. It doesn't have any value to me. What has value to me is listening to the candidate explain, hey, what are you going to do for this, and this, not for something that you really don't understand. That's all. That's all I was saying.
I agree. What I'm asking for, I know is impossible, right? The incentive structure of a politician is to make promises, and that's how you get into office. And that speaks to what Tony mentioned earlier. I understand that.
I know, but let's also, Vic, let's understand what we have politicians for. It is simply to make the system work. You know, a politician is not an entrepreneur. A politician is not a business person. A politician doesn't exist in whatever the role is for any of the reasons that you do what you do, Tony does what he does, I do what I do. That is not the role of a politician. A politician's role is to make the system, the way I explained it yesterday, just like a good waiter, make the system work, okay? Take your order, bring out the food, make the system work. And keep everything running smoothly, and be that person that's the go-between between how the system works and how you understand how the system works. That's it. That is the role. And when we expect more from politicians than that, we get disappointed. What a really good politician does is they're able to explain that role, and they're able to facilitate that role. Politicians are facilitators. That's it. That's why people that can articulate things in a certain way. That's why, for example, Obama was so good, because he had the ability to articulate things and kind of just explain things and keep everything running smoothly. And that is a rare trait. That is a rare character trait. Unfortunately, we haven't had that in a while. And I'm just hoping that in the future, that's what I want to get out of a debate. I want somebody that's intelligent and that I feel like can bridge that transition from one to another. And that's what a really good politician should do.
I'm with you 100% on that. I totally understand the incentive structure is to promise not to address this, but that's sort of the problem, is that we're going to keep going down this road until it forces us to address it.